What if I told you that the person you can't get out of your mind isn't there by chance? That this strange connection, this peace you feel in their presence, could be much more than just an emotion? What if it's Allah Himself trying to show you something over and over again, but you haven't figured it out yet? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear could transform the way you view this relationship and maybe your entire life. You know, sometimes you look around you and ask yourself, why does my heart always return to this person? Why, despite everything I do, despite my attempts to forget, do I always return to the same inner certainty? And then you feel lost, between doubt and hope, between the fear of making a mistake and the desire to believe it's a sign. But let me tell you something that few people truly understand. Allah doesn't place souls in your path randomly. Nothing is accidental. You didn't choose to feel what you do. You didn't decide that this person would leave such an imprint on your heart. It's as if your soul recognized something your mind can't yet explain. There are encounters that turn everything upside down. Not because they're loud, not because they're spectacular, but because they activate a part of you you thought was switched off. They awaken your heart, they awaken your faith, they awaken your need for guidance. And when that happens, you begin to see coincidences that aren't really coincidences. Words that arrive at the right time, prayers you say in silence that suddenly find an answer through that person. Think about it for a moment. Perhaps you've prayed, nights on end, for your path to be illuminated. Perhaps you've asked for a sign, a guide, a confirmation. And then Allah sends you a person who embodies the peace you've been seeking. A person who not only brings you human affection, but also awakens in you the memory of your Creator. Do you really think this is trivial? There is a hidden wisdom behind these spiritual connections. Because you could encounter hundreds of faces, you could receive the attention of many people. But only one person remains in your heart like an indelible mark. It's as if your soul knows a truth that your body and mind still try to deny. And this truth is that sometimes Allah places people to be an answer to your supplication. But be careful, it's not always a gentle and easy response. Sometimes this person comes to confront you with your weaknesses. They come to awaken wounds you wanted to bury. They come to highlight the areas of your heart that need healing. Because the goal isn't just for you to find a companion. The goal is for you to become a better person, to elevate yourself, to draw closer to Allah through this connection. So when you feel this inner strength, this tugging that won't leave you alone, understand that it's more than just an emotion. It's a calling, a reminder that your Creator is not absent from your story. It is He who writes. It is He who chooses. It is He who connects souls, sometimes in mysterious ways, but always with perfect wisdom. And I know you're afraid. You're afraid of making a mistake. You're afraid of believing in a sign that isn't one. But think, why is your heart so stubborn? Why, despite all your attempts to move on, to turn the page, does it always return in the same direction? If it were only an illusion, it would have dissipated long ago. But on the contrary, the more you move forward, the stronger the feeling becomes. The more you pray, the more certainty grows. So ask yourself the real question. Is this connection distancing you from Allah? Or is it bringing you closer? Because that is the secret. The person Allah intends for your heart is not just the one who gives you human love. She's the one who helps you remember your ultimate goal. She's the one whose presence calls you to be a better version of yourself. She's the one who, without even knowing it, pushes you to raise your hands in prayer with more sincerity. Perhaps you thought a sign from Allah would come like a bright light in the sky, but sometimes that sign is an ordinary person. with an extraordinary presence in your heart. And if you're listening to these words today, perhaps it's precisely because Allah wants you to understand this. So ask yourself, is it a coincidence that you came across this video at this precise moment in your life? Is it a coincidence that you're hearing these words at the exact moment your heart is searching for an answer? Or is all this part of a plan that you don't yet clearly see, but which is finally beginning to make sense before you? Imagine someone, perhaps like you, in the midst of a period of uncertainty. Every night, he closes his eyes and his thoughts become heavy. He prays, sometimes with clear words, sometimes with only silent tears. He asks for direction, a sign, a certainty. But the days pass, and around him, faces pass like depthless shadows. Opportunities appear, but they dissipate just as quickly like smoke. Nothing truly touches his heart. And then, suddenly, someone enters his life. Not with a din, not with a spectacular flourish. They don't shine with a dazzling arrival. They don't impose themselves. Number. They enter gently, almost discreetly, as if they've always been there, waiting for the right moment to appear. At first, he doesn't understand. He tells himself it's just another encounter, a passing moment. But little by little, he notices something different. This person doesn't do much, but their presence is unusual. She doesn't try to seduce. She doesn't force anything, and yet she stays. Her consistency is unsettling. Every word this person utters seems to carry a special weight. Even a simple sentence, even a shared silence, takes on a strange depth. And in his heart he finds himself feeling an unusual peace. Not a superficial excitement, not a simple desire, but an inner tranquility he's never known. That's when everything begins to change. Because he realizes that this person's absence isn't neutral. When they're not there, a void is created. Not a lack of companionship, not ordinary loneliness, but an inner quest that awakens. As if this person had opened a secret door in his heart, a door to a part of himself he'd forgotten. And little by little, he understands. This person isn't just another human being. She's like an answer incarnate, an answer to a prayer he didn't even know he'd uttered. Because sometimes you think you're praying for success, for stability, for happiness. But in reality, your soul is asking for something else. Your soul is asking for an outstretched hand, a light on your path, a companion that only Allah can send you. Then he remembers those nights when he asked, "O Allah, show me the way, enlighten me, give me a sign." And he realizes that the sign didn't come in the form of a spectacular dream, nor a heavenly voice. It came in the form of a human heart, chosen and precisely placed in his story. And you know what's most disturbing? It's not the grandeur of this encounter, but its simplicity. No noise, no drama, no brilliance. Just a presence that becomes impossible to ignore. Like a discreet star in a dark sky, small, but enough to guide the seeker. The more time passes, the more this person becomes obvious. Not a logically obvious fact, not one you explain with arguments, but an obvious fact that can be felt. An inner certainty, calm but powerful, that transcends the intellect. And that's where the real struggle begins. Because the heart recognizes, but the mind doubts. It asks itself, what if I'm wrong? What if this is just an illusion? What if this bond is just a passing attachment? So it struggles between what it feels and what it fears. between the inner impulse and the fear of taking the wrong path. But despite everything, it always returns to that same person. No matter how hard it tries to divert its thoughts, they return. No matter how much it tries to convince itself it's nothing, its heart insists. Like an inner compass that, despite all its movements, always ends up pointing in the same direction. And it was at that precise moment that he began to realize something profound. What if it wasn't me who had chosen? What if it was Allah who had written this long ago? What if this encounter wasn't a coincidence, but an essential step in my story? So he stopped resisting. He stopped looking for material proof. He began to observe differently, to see the small signs, the synchronicity of moments, the phrases spoken without intention, but which fell like answers to his prayers, the serenity that accompanied each interaction. And he realized that sometimes the greatest confirmation from Allah wasn't a voice from heaven, but a peace that invaded your heart every time you thought of a person. So imagine yourself in their place and ask yourself, why does this person remain in your heart so strongly? Why does their memory persist, despite time, despite distractions, despite everything that should have erased it? Tell me something. Why does your heart always return to the same person? Why is it that despite your efforts to divert your thoughts, despite all the distractions you seek, despite the external voices that try to convince you otherwise, your mind always finds its way to them again and again? Have you ever wondered why? Do you think it's just a coincidence? Do you think your soul attaches itself randomly, clings to someone without any wisdom behind it? Then let me ask you another question. Why is it that, when you pray in secret, is their image that returns to your mind? Why is it that, when you seek answers, it's their presence that comes to you like a silent reminder? Do you choose these thoughts, or do they choose you? Is it you who decide to feel this peace, or is it a peace placed in your heart by someone greater than yourself? Stop for a second and think. If you had complete control over your heart, you might have already moved on. You would have erased this person from your mind. But still, they remain. So why? Why does your heart insist on returning to where your mind wants to escape? What if this insistence isn't a weakness, but a sign? What if what you take for an obsession, what you take for an inability to let go, is actually Allah's way of nudging you in the right direction? Think about this. How many times in your life have you met people? How many faces have you encountered? How many conversations have you had? And yet, only one person remains like a burning imprint on your heart. Why this one and not another? Why now and not before? Do you believe your heart clings without its creator's permission? Do you believe your soul randomly chooses who it will deeply connect with? Number. Because your heart is in the hands of Allah. And if your heart always returns to this person, perhaps it's because he wants to teach you something through them. So ask yourself, what do you really feel when you think of them? Is it a desire that pulls you down, or a peace that lifts you up? Is it a distraction that distances you from your Creator, or a reminder that brings you back to Him? Because the real question isn't just why this person. The real question is, what is Allah trying to show me through this person? Does He want to teach you patience? Does He want to teach you trust? Does He want to teach you that some souls were created to find each other, even in a world full of noise and chaos? And you, are you ready to listen? Or do you continue to run away from what your heart keeps repeating? You see, sometimes Allah doesn't speak to you through words. Sometimes He doesn't send you signs that your eyes can read directly. Sometimes He speaks to you through what persists in your soul, through what resists forgetting, through what clings to you even when you want to get rid of it. So, how many more times are you going to ignore this feeling? How many more times are you going to tell yourself it's nothing when it always comes back, stronger and clearer? What if, through this person, Allah was trying to show you part of your destiny? What if the fact that your heart is soothed by the thought of her isn't a weakness but guidance? What if this constant return isn't a coincidence, but a subtle confirmation that you still refuse to see? So I ask you the question one last time. Why does your heart always return to this same person? And what does that really mean for you today? You know, there are bonds that no one can explain. Connections that transcend logic, that defy reason. They aren't bonds built on appearances, nor on shared interests, nor on human calculations. Number, they are mysterious, invisible bonds that touch a part of you that you don't show to the world. And when you meet someone like that, something strange happens. Your soul recognizes them even before your mind understands. You don't know why, you don't know how, but you know. You sense that this presence is not ordinary. It doesn't come to fill a superficial void. It comes to satisfy a deep thirst that you've longed for. And that's where most people go wrong. They think that love, or attachment, or even affection are simple human emotions that can be controlled, measured, compared. But what you feel isn't an emotion. It's an inner certainty. It's a peace that descends into your heart like a gentle light. And this peace, you didn't choose. You didn't create it. It was given to you. Because your soul is not mistaken when it recognizes itself in another. Allah is the one who unites hearts. Allah is the one who places a person in your life as a silent response. And if your heart rests in someone's presence, it's not a coincidence. It's not a simple attraction. It's perhaps the most subtle and powerful proof that this person is part of the plan Allah has written for you. So ask yourself, why do you feel this peace? Why is it that in a world filled with noise, this person brings you silence? Why is it that in a life full of uncertainty, this person gives you a stability that nothing else can? Perhaps because Allah chose for your path and His to cross. Perhaps because He knows that your souls need each other for support. Perhaps because this person is not only a part of your story, but a part of your spiritual elevation. For there are people who come into your life to test you, to teach you patience, to expose you to your own flaws. And then there are people your heart recognizes as a refuge. Not a refuge that takes you away from your Creator, but a refuge that brings you back to Him. A hand that lifts you up, a voice that soothes you, a look that reminds you that Allah heard you when you thought He had forgotten you. And when you understand this, something inside you changes. Because you realize you don't need rational explanations. You don't need external proof. This connection is already proof. This inner peace is already a testimony. And this testimony is Allah who has placed it in your heart. So listen carefully. If you feel this tranquility when you think of someone, it's not trivial. It's a sign that there's something greater behind this bond. Perhaps this person is destined to be by your side in this world. Or perhaps they are destined to transform you, to awaken within you prayers you would never have prayed without them. But in both cases, there is wisdom. In both cases, there is a trace of your Creator saying to you, I have not forgotten you. I sent someone to walk with you, to remind you who you are, to gently guide you towards me. And you, how do you feel when you hear this? Does your heart tighten? Or on the contrary, does it relax as if it has just heard a truth it has been waiting for a long time? Because if you feel a deep peace when you think of someone, that may be the answer. Not an answer you sought in outward signs, not an answer you found in the words of others, but an inner answer delivered directly by the one who knows your soul better than you know yourself. So why are you still struggling? Why do you continue to doubt when your heart already knows? Why are you trying to stifle a bond that your Creator chose to keep alive? Perhaps you are not ready to admit it. Perhaps you're afraid. But know one thing: this peace you feel, this serenity that fills you when you think of this person, it's not an illusion. It may be one of the clearest signs that Allah shows you, but that you still refuse to see. And if you understand this today, then everything you thought was confusing takes on a different color. Because this connection is not just a human emotion. It is a divine scripture, an invisible thread that connects your soul to another, for a reason that only you, by walking sincerely towards Allah, will one day discover.
Think of a compass. No matter how many times you turn it, no matter how bumpy it is, no matter the obstacles,
its needle always ends up pointing north. It may hesitate, tremble, deviate for a moment, but in the end, it returns to its place. It returns to what is written, to what does not change. Your heart works the same way. You can try to stun it with distractions. You can try to trick it with easy choices. You can even force it to look elsewhere. But once silence returns, once everything calms down, it always points in the same direction, toward that person you're trying to deny. It's like walking in an endless desert. You turn left, you turn right, you change your route 1,000 times. But the sun always ends up rising in the same place. You can avoid it for a while, but you can't change its place in the sky. In the same way, you can push away the obvious, but your soul already knows its own path. What if this inner direction, this north that relentlessly draws you, wasn't just an emotion? Or what if it was Allah who planted this orientation within you, just as He planted an invisible magnet in every compass? Imagine your heart is a sea. On the surface, there are rough waves, storms, and opposing winds. These waves represent your doubts, your fears, your wounds. But deep down, the water is calm. And at the bottom of this sea, there is an invisible current that always pulls you toward the same shore. No matter how strong the waves, this current eventually brings your soul back to where it belongs. And you sometimes think you're lost, when in reality, you're already carried by this current. You see, there are truths that cannot be forced, truths that cannot be invented. They exist like the laws of nature. Water always seeks to descend, fire always seeks to burn, and your heart always seeks what your Creator intended for it. So why do you struggle? Why do you try to break a law that doesn't belong to you? Why do you believe you can extinguish what your Lord has lit? It's as if you were trying to hold your breath forever. You can hold for a few seconds, you can resist for a moment, but your body will eventually cry out for air, because that's its nature. In the same way, your soul cries out for what Allah has written for it. You can resist, you can flee, but at some point, it brings you back to that person. And the more you fight, the more the tension grows within you. Like a river you try to block with stones, the water accumulates, and ends up carrying everything away in its path. Because you can't block what is meant to flow. So look carefully. This inner north isn't a whim. It's not a weakness. It's a sign from your Creator. Because Allah doesn't place a magnet inside you for no reason. He doesn't let your heart cling to one person so persistently just to lead you astray. And if you pay attention, you'll see that it's not just an attraction. It's an orientation. A direction calling you. A direction that's not chaotic, not destructive, but, on the contrary, brings you a silent peace, an inner stability. So tell me, have you ever noticed that the more you try to forget that person, the more the signs return? as if the world around you were gently conspiring to remind you of her. A word, a coincidence, a trivial moment. And suddenly, your heart starts pointing towards her again. What if all this wasn't a coincidence? What if what you take for repetitions was actually confirmation? Because deep down, you already know there are directions we choose with the mind, and there are those we recognize with the soul. And when it's your soul that speaks, you can doubt as much as you want. It will always win in the end. So look at your heart like a compass. Observe where it points when you don't influence it. Observe where it returns when silence sets in. Observe the peace it feels when it follows its true north. And ask yourself, couldn't this inner north be the direction Allah has traced for you from the very beginning? So ask yourself, why does this person persist in your mind, in your heart, in your path? Why? Despite all your attempts to ignore them, despite the advice of others, despite your own fears, does their presence return again and again like a shadow that refuses to disappear? Why does their name appear in your quietest thoughts, even in your prayers, even when you don't say it out loud? Why? Every time you think you've moved on, a detail, a sign, a coincidence brings back their memory with even greater force. What if what you take for simple attachment isn't a human weakness, but a divine confirmation that you refuse to see? What if it's not your imagination that insists, but Allah Himself who insists? Think about it for a second. You've tried loving other people before, haven't you? You've tried filling that void with something else. And yet, nothing worked. Other connections eventually fade. Other faces disappear over time. But this one? No. This one remains. Why? Do you really believe your heart clings to chance? Do you think it persists for no reason? That it persists simply on a whim? A number. Because your heart is shaped by the one who knows. And if your heart always returns to the same person, it may be because Allah is trying to show you a truth you don't yet have the courage to accept. But then, why do you still doubt? Why this inner conflict? Why this fear of admitting what your soul silently cries out? Perhaps because you're afraid of making a mistake, afraid of calling a sign what is only an illusion, afraid of believing in divine writing and discovering later that you've invented a story. But think about it. If it were only an illusion, would it have survived all these trials? Would it have withstood time, silences, distances? Would it still be there, alive, burning, even though you've done everything to stifle it? What if, on the contrary, this persistence were the proof? What if this silence of your heart before others and this insistence before a single person were the clarity you've always been waiting for? Because sometimes Allah doesn't speak to you through external noises. Sometimes He doesn't send you a visible miracle. Sometimes He doesn't shout. He doesn't knock on your door. He simply places a certainty in your soul, and He waits for you to have the courage to listen. So tell me, how much longer will you run away from this certainty? How much longer will you ignore the signs that are constantly repeated? How many times will you try to fill your heart elsewhere when it already knows where it belongs? What if this person isn't just someone you love, but someone your destiny demands? What if this connection is one of the greatest reminders Allah has placed in your life, but you refuse to admit it because the truth is frightening? Then listen carefully. What you feel is not weakness. What you feel is not obsession. What you feel is perhaps a divine scripture knocking at the door of your heart again and again until you stop resisting. And the real danger isn't believing. The real danger is continuing to doubt what your soul already knows. So I ask you again, one last time, why does this person persist in your mind? Why, despite everything, can't your heart let go? What if what you've been running away from for so long, was actually the clearest sign Allah has ever sent you.
If, while listening to these words, your heart thought of someone in particular, then don't ignore this sign. Don't let this reminder pass you by. Take a moment, reflect deeply, ask Allah for more clarity, and dare to listen to what your heart is trying to tell you. And if you want more powerful reminders like this, subscribe now, activate the bell, and share this video with someone who needs it. Because sometimes, the message you're waiting for is right there, just waiting to be heard.